I always thought my family was like any other. Messy, loud, sometimes loving, sometimes impossible. We lived in a faded blue house on the edge of a small Ohio town, the kind of place where everyone knows your business before you do. My mom, Linda, was the kind of woman who could make a casserole out of anything and a fight out of nothing. My dad, Frank, was quieter, a man of few words and even fewer smiles, but when he laughed, it filled the whole house. And then there was me, Sam. The only child, the golden boy, or so I thought. It was a Sunday afternoon in late October, the kind where the air smells like burning leaves and the sky is a flat, endless gray. I was home from college for the weekend, sitting at the kitchen table, picking at a plate of cold meatloaf. Mom was bustling around, wiping down counters that were already clean, her lips pressed tight. Dad sat across from me, reading the sports section, his coffee growing cold. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and to the occasional clink of Mom's wedding ring against the formica. I could feel something brewing, like a storm just out of sight. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the crossword puzzle in front of me, but my hands were shaking. "Sam, can you take out the trash?" Mom's voice was sharp, too loud for the quiet room. "Yeah, sure," I said, pushing back my chair. I grabbed the bag, tying it off with a practiced twist, and headed for the back door. As I passed Dad, he didn't look up, but I caught the way his jaw clenched, the way his fingers tightened around the newspaper. Outside, the air was cold and damp. I stood by the trash cans for a minute, breathing in the smell of wet earth and old leaves, trying to steady myself. I didn't know why I felt so uneasy, but it was there, a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. When I came back inside, Mom and Dad were arguing in low voices. I paused in the hallway, listening. "He has a right to know, Frank," Mom was saying, her voice trembling. "Not now, Linda." "Not like this," Dad replied, his words clipped. I stepped into the kitchen, and they both fell silent. Mom's eyes were red, and Dad wouldn't meet my gaze. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom looked at Dad, then back at me. "Sam, sit down. We need to talk." I sat, my heart pounding. The room felt suddenly too small, the walls closing in. "There's something we should have told you a long time ago," Mom began, her hands twisting in her lap. "Something about your past. About where you come from." I stared at her, not understanding. "What do you mean?" Dad finally looked up, his eyes tired. "You're not our biological son, Sam. We adopted you when you were a baby." The words hit me like a punch. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world tilted, and I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "What?" My voice cracked. "You're joking, right?" Mom shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, honey. We wanted to tell you, but we were afraid. We thought it was best to wait, but then it just never seemed like the right time." I looked at Dad, searching his face for some sign that this was a mistake, a cruel joke. But he just nodded, his expression grim. I stood up so fast my chair toppled over. "So my whole life has been a lie?" "Everything, it wasn't a lie," Mom said, reaching for me. "I love you, Sam. You're our son, no matter what." I pulled away, my chest tight. "I need to get out of here." I grabbed my jacket and bolted for the door, the cold air hitting me like a slap. I walked for hours, through empty streets and silent fields, trying to make sense of it all. My mind raced with questions. Who were my real parents? Why didn't they want me? Why did Mom and Dad keep this from me for so long? By the time I made it back home, the house was dark. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The next morning, the house was silent. I could hear Mom moving around in the kitchen, the soft clatter of dishes, the hiss of the kettle. I stayed in bed, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, replaying the night before over and over. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, but I ignored them. I didn't know how to talk about this, didn't even know how to think about it. Eventually, hunger and curiosity got the better of me. I dragged myself out of bed and shuffled into the kitchen. Mom was sitting at the table, a mug of tea cradled in her hands. She looked up when I entered, her eyes swollen and tired. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, her voice tentative. I nodded, grabbing a bowl and pouring myself some cereal. The milk splashed, and I realized my hands were shaking again. I sat across from her, not meeting her gaze. We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Finally, Mom spoke. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. We should have told you sooner. I stared at my cereal, the flakes turning soggy. Why didn't you? She sighed, rubbing her temples. At first, we were just. We didn't want to lose you. And then, as you got older, it got harder and harder to find the right moment. We kept telling ourselves we'd do it next year, or when you were ready. But the truth is, we were the ones who weren't ready. I looked up at her, searching her face for answers. Do you know anything about my real parents? She hesitated, then nodded. A little. You were born in Cleveland. Your birth mother was very young, and she couldn't take care of you. She wanted you to have a better life. We never met her, but we got a letter from her when you were born. I kept it if you want to see it. I felt a strange mix of anger and curiosity. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her feel the chaos I felt inside. But another part of me just wanted answers. Where's Dad? I asked. She looked away. He went to work early. He thought it might be easier to give you some space. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I finished my cereal in silence, then stood up. Can I see the letter? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom nodded, getting up and disappearing into her bedroom. She came back a few minutes later with a faded envelope. She handed it to me, her hands trembling. I took it to my room, sitting on the edge of my bed. The paper was thin and worn, the handwriting neat but shaky. I unfolded it carefully, my heart pounding. Dear baby, it began. I hope someday you'll understand why I had to let you go. I love you more than anything, but I can't give you the life you deserve. I hope you find a family who will love you and take care of you. Please don't hate me. Love, your birth mother. I read the letter over and over, the words blurring as tears filled my eyes. I didn't know what to feel, grief, anger, relief, confusion. It all swirled together, leaving me hollow. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I wandered around the house, picking up old photos, looking for clues. Every memory felt different now, tainted by the knowledge that I didn't really belong. I thought about calling my friends, but what would I even say? Hey, guess what? Turns out my whole life is a lie. That night, Dad came home late. I heard him in the kitchen, talking quietly with Mom. I stayed in my room, listening to music, trying to drown out the sound of their voices. Eventually, there was a soft knock at my door. Sam? Can I come in? Dad's voice was gentle, almost pleading. I hesitated, then nodded, even though he couldn't see me. He opened the door and sat on the edge of my bed, his hands folded in his lap. I'm sorry, son, he said. I know this is a lot. I wish we'd handled it better. I stared at the floor, my throat tight. Why didn't you tell me? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I was afraid. Afraid you'd hate us, or that you'd leave. You're my son, Sam. That's never changed. I looked at him, searching for the father I thought I knew. But I'm not really your son, am I? He reached out, putting a hand on my shoulder. You're my son in every way that matters. Blood doesn't make a family. Love does. I wanted to believe him, but the words felt hollow. I pulled away, turning to face the wall. I need some time, I said quietly. He nodded, standing up. Take all the time you need. We're here when you're ready. As the door closed behind him, I felt a wave of loneliness crash over me. I didn't know who I was anymore, or where I belonged. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed blurred together. I went through the motions, eating, sleeping, pretending to study for midterms, but inside, I was unraveling. Every time I looked at my parents, I saw strangers. Every family photo on the wall felt like a lie. I started avoiding home, spending hours wandering the town or sitting in my car at the edge of the old quarry, staring at the water and trying to make sense of who I was. One evening, a week after the truth came out, I found myself driving aimlessly, the radio low, headlights cutting through the early November fog. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Tyler. "You alive, man? Haven't seen you in days." I almost replied, but what could I say? I wasn't ready to let anyone in. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the porch light. I hesitated before going in, bracing myself for another round of awkward silences and forced small talk. But as soon as I stepped inside, I heard voices, Mom and Dad, arguing in the living room. "He barely looks at us, Frank. He's shutting down. We have to do something," Mom was saying, her voice tight with worry. Dad's reply was quieter, but I caught the edge in his tone. "He needs time, Linda. Pushing him won't help." I stood in the hallway, my fists clenched. I hated that they were talking about me like I wasn't there, like I was some problem to be solved. I wanted to scream, to make them understand how lost I felt, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I went upstairs and shut my door, sinking onto my bed. I pulled out the letter from my birth mother, reading it again, searching for something, anything, that would make this easier. But all I found was more pain. The next morning, I woke to the smell of pancakes. It was Mom's way of apologizing, her peace offering. I almost stayed in bed, but my stomach won out. Downstairs, she was flipping pancakes, humming softly. Dad sat at the table, sipping coffee, his eyes tired. "Morning, Sam," Mom said, forcing a smile. I nodded, grabbing a plate. The pancakes tasted like childhood, but I felt like a stranger at my own table. Dad cleared his throat. "We were thinking. Maybe you'd like to talk to someone. A counselor, maybe. Just to help you process all this." I bristled. "I'm not crazy." "No one said you were," Mom said gently. "But this is a lot to handle. You don't have to do it alone." I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. "I just need space. Please." They exchanged a look, but didn't push. I left the house, walking until my legs ached. I ended up at the park, sitting on a swing, watching little kids play. Their laughter felt like a different language, one I no longer understood. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. Who am I? Where do I belong? I thought about my birth mother, about the life I might have had. Did she ever think about me? Did she regret her choice? I started searching online, looking up adoption forums, reading stories from people like me. Some found their birth parents, some didn't. Some felt whole, others broken. I didn't know which I was. A few days later, I finally texted Tyler back. "Can we talk?" He replied instantly, and we met at the old diner on Main Street. The place hadn't changed in years. Red vinyl booths, sticky tables, the smell of burnt coffee. Tyler slid into the booth across from me, concern etched on his face. "Dude, you look like hell." I managed a weak smile. "Thanks." He waited, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I blurted it out. "I found out I'm adopted. My parents just told me." He blinked, surprised. "Oh, that's... Are you okay?" I shrugged. "I don't know. I feel like I don't belong anywhere. Like my whole life is fake." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You're still you, man. Doesn't matter where you came from." I wanted to believe him, but the doubt lingered. We talked for a while, Tyler doing most of the talking, telling stupid stories from high school, trying to make me laugh. For the first time in days, I felt a little less alone. When I got home that night, Mom was waiting up. She handed me a mug of tea, her hands shaking. "I know you're hurting," she said softly. "But we love you, Sam. Nothing will ever change that." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I wanted to believe her, but the walls I'd built felt too high to climb. As I lay in bed, I realized I had a choice. I could keep running, keep shutting everyone out. Or I could try to find a way forward, even if it hurt. I didn't know what the right answer was. But for the first time, I wanted to try. Thanksgiving came early that year, or at least it felt that way. The leaves were barely off the trees, but Mom was already pulling out the good china and making lists, determined to keep up the traditions. I watched her from the doorway, her movements brisk and purposeful, as if she could scrub away the tension with enough elbow grease. I tried to help, peeling potatoes at the counter, but the silence between us was thick. Every so often, she'd glance at me, her eyes searching, but I kept my head down. Dad was in the garage, pretending to fix the lawnmower, but I knew he was just hiding. We were all hiding in our own ways. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, Mom knocked on my door. She stood in the hallway, wringing her hands, her face pale in the dim light. "Can we talk?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. She sat on the edge of my bed, smoothing the blanket with nervous fingers. "I know things have been hard," she began, her voice trembling. "I wish I could take away your pain, Sam. I wish I could make this easier." I stared at my hands, the words stuck in my throat. "Why didn't you ever tell me? Didn't you think I deserved to know?" She flinched, tears welling in her eyes. "Of course you did. We were scared. We thought if we loved you enough, it wouldn't matter. But it does matter. I see that now." I swallowed hard, anger and sadness warring inside me. "I feel like I don't even know who I am anymore." She reached for my hand, her grip warm and desperate. "You're my son. That's all I know. I may not have given birth to you, but I've loved you every day of your life." I wanted to pull away, to hold on to my anger, but her words broke something in me. I started to cry, big, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. She held me, rocking me like she did when I was little, whispering that it was okay, that she was sorry, that she loved me. After a while, I pulled back, wiping my eyes. Do you think I could ever meet her? My birth mom?" She nodded, her own eyes shining. "If that's what you want, we'll help you. Whatever you need." For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I could find answers. Maybe I could start to put the pieces together. Thanksgiving was awkward, but we got through it. Aunt Carol and Uncle Mike came over, bringing their usual chaos. The house was filled with laughter and the smell of turkey, and for a few hours, things almost felt normal. I caught Dad watching me across the table, his eyes soft. After dinner, he pulled me aside, his voice low. "I know I'm not perfect, Sam. I've made a lot of mistakes. But I want you to know, I'm proud of you. No matter what." I nodded, emotion choking me. "Thanks, Dad." He clapped me on the shoulder, awkward but sincere. "We'll get through this. Together." That night, I lay in bed, thinking about my birth mother. What was she like? Did she look like me? Did she ever think about the boy she gave away? I didn't have answers, but for the first time, I wanted to find them. The next week, Mom helped me start the process. She dug out old paperwork, made calls, filled out forms. It was slow, frustrating work, but she never complained. Dad hovered in the background, offering quiet support. One afternoon, I got an email from the adoption agency. They had found a possible match, a woman named Rachel, living in Cleveland. My heart pounded as I read her name, the reality of it hitting me all at once. I showed the email to Mom and Dad. They hugged me, their faces a mix of fear and hope. "Whatever happens, we're here for you," Mom said. I nodded, clutching the printout. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to see it through. That night, I wrote Rachel a letter. I told her who I was, what I knew, what I wanted to know. I poured my heart onto the page, not sure if she would ever read it, let alone respond. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a strange sense of peace. I was scared, but I was also ready. Ready to face the truth, whatever it was. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. The days after I sent the letter to Rachel crawled by, each one heavier than the last. I checked my email obsessively, jumping at every notification, my heart leaping and then sinking when it was just spam or a class reminder. Mom tried to distract me with little projects, helping her reorganize the pantry, raking the last stubborn leaves in the yard, but my mind was always somewhere else, circling the same questions. Dad was quieter than usual, but every so often, I'd catch him watching me with a look I couldn't quite read, part worry, part pride, maybe a little fear. We didn't talk much, but one night as I was heading up to bed, he stopped me in the hallway. "Sam," he said, his voice rough, "I know this is hard. I just want you to know, whatever you find out, whatever you decide, you're still my son. That's never going to change." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Thanks, Dad." He squeezed my shoulder, then let me go, and I realized how much I needed to hear those words. A week later, I got an email from Rachel. The subject line was simple, "Hello, Sam." My hands shook as I opened it. She wrote that she'd been waiting for this day for years, that she thought about me every birthday, every holiday. She told me about her life, how she was just 17 when she had me, how scared she'd been, how she'd made the hardest choice of her life because she wanted me to have a chance she couldn't give. She said she'd always hoped I'd find her, but she never wanted to intrude on my life. Reading her words, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. She sounded kind, thoughtful, but also haunted by the same questions I had. She included a photo, a woman with my eyes, my smile, standing in front of a little house with a dog at her feet. For the first time, I saw myself in someone else. I showed the email to Mom and Dad. Mom cried, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. Dad just nodded, his eyes shining. We started emailing back and forth, Rachel and I. At first, it was awkward, careful questions, polite answers. But slowly we opened up. She told me about her favorite books, her job at the library, the brother and sister I never knew I had. I told her about my life, my friends, my love of baseball, the way I always burn toast. We found little pieces of ourselves in each other, and it felt like discovering a new part of me I never knew was missing. After a few weeks, Rachel asked if I wanted to meet. The idea terrified me, but I knew I had to do it. Mom and Dad offered to come with me, but I said I wanted to go alone. I needed to do this for myself. The drive to Cleveland was long and tense. I rehearsed what I'd say, what I'd ask, but when I finally pulled up in front of Rachel's house, my mind went blank. She opened the door before I could knock, her face pale and nervous. "Hi, Sam," she said, her voice trembling. "Hi," I managed, my own voice barely more than a whisper. We stood there for a moment, unsure, then she pulled me into a hug. It was awkward at first, but then something shifted, and I felt a warmth I hadn't expected. Inside, we sat at her kitchen table, drinking tea, talking about everything and nothing. She showed me old photos, told me stories about her life, her regrets, her hopes. I listened, soaking it all in, trying to fit the pieces together. At one point, she reached across the table, taking my hand. "I'm so sorry, Sam. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted you to have a better life." I squeezed her hand, tears in my eyes. "I'm glad you did. I have a good life. I needed to know." We talked for hours, and by the time I left, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. I didn't have all the answers, but I had something I'd been missing, connection, understanding, a sense of where I came from. Driving home, I realized I wasn't alone. I had two families now, two histories, two sets of people who loved me in their own ways. It was messy and complicated, but it was real. When I walked in the door, Mom and Dad were waiting. I hugged them both, holding on a little longer than usual. "I'm okay," I said, and for the first time I meant it. Winter settled in, blanketing our little town in quiet and cold. The holidays came and went, softer than usual, but with a new kind of warmth. I spent Christmas morning with Mom and Dad, laughing over burnt cinnamon rolls and watching old movies, and then drove up to Cleveland to see Rachel and her family. It was strange, splitting myself between two worlds, but somehow it felt right. I was learning to hold both parts of my story at once. Rachel introduced me to my half-siblings, Maya, who was 12 and obsessed with horses, and Ben, who was 9 and wanted to be a magician. They were shy at first, but kids are quick to accept what adults struggle with. By the end of the day, Ben was showing me card tricks and Maya was braiding my hair, and I felt something settle in my chest, a sense of belonging I hadn't known I was missing. Back home, things with Mom and Dad were still fragile, but we were trying. There were hard days, days when I pulled away, when the old anger flared up, when I wondered if I'd ever really forgive them for keeping the truth from me. But there were good days too. Days when we cooked together, or watched the snow fall, or just sat in comfortable silence, knowing we were all doing our best. One night after dinner, Dad and I sat in the living room, the fire crackling. He cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "I know I can't change the past," he said, staring into the flames. "But I want you to know, I'd choose you again. Every time. I swallowed hard, the words catching in my chest. Thanks, Dad. I'd choose you too. He smiled, and for the first time in a long while, it felt easy between us. I started seeing a counselor, like Mom had suggested. At first, I hated it, sitting in a stuffy office, talking about feelings I barely understood. But slowly it helped. I learned that it was okay to be angry, to grieve the life I never had, to love both my families without betraying either. I learned that my story was mine to tell, and that I could set my own boundaries. Rachel and I kept in touch, sometimes meeting for coffee, sometimes just texting. She never pushed, never tried to take the place of Mom, but she was there when I needed her. Over time, the ache of not knowing faded, replaced by something gentler, a quiet gratitude for the chance to know her, to know myself. Spring came, and with it, a sense of renewal. I went back to college, but I came home more often, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The house felt different now, less like a museum of secrets, more like a place where I could just be. Looking back, I realized that the truth hadn't broken us. It had hurt, yes, deeply in ways I was still learning to name. But it had also set us free. Free to be honest, to be messy, to love each other not because we had to, but because we chose to. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that family isn't just about blood or secrets or even forgiveness. It's about showing up again and again, even when it's hard. It's about letting yourself be known, and letting others know you in return. So if you're reading this, and you're carrying a secret, or a hurt, or a question about where you belong, know that you're not alone. The truth is hard, but it's also the beginning of something new. You get to decide what comes next. And if you've ever felt like you don't belong, remember, you get to choose your family too. What do you think? Have you ever experienced something similar? Or do you have thoughts about family and forgiveness? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.